Hello, and congratulations with the purchase of the AVer AW200 4K wireless presentation system. In today's video, we'll take a more in-depth look at the network configuration of the AW200, as well as administration tools for setting up your network and diving deeper and providing more detail on more options available in the AW200. As mentioned before, the AVer AW200 4K wireless presentation system comes with one AR200 receiver and two AP200 pods. The AW200 is able to provide up to 4K video resolution. As mentioned before, can be used as a standalone wireless presentation system or connected to your existing network for more of an integrated user experience, which we will go into detail today. There are no apps required. The AW200 supports a split screen display of up to 4 separate sources. There are connections on the AP200s for HDMI, mini DP, and a USB connection for mobile mirroring. A quick review of the AW200. The AR200 receiver has a DC input, 5 volts at 2 amps, a power switch, a recessed reset button if needed, a USB connection to say a touchscreen, or also downloading pairing files if needed. An Ethernet RJ45 connection for hardwired network connectivity, and an HDMI output. On the top of the receiver, there is a pairing button, which is only needed when you're adding additional pods to your system. Quick look at the AP200. There's a connection for a mini DP, HDMI, Ethernet. It supports PoE 5 volts at 1 amp, a USB connection if connecting to a phone, and there's also a PC or mobile switch depending on which device you're connecting to. A typical AW200 integration within a conference room, you would have the AP200 sitting on the conference table all by itself or connected via PoE. In this configuration, you can connect the AP200 via USB cable, a hardwired cable, to your device, to your laptop, as well as an HDMI connection. You would then pair it to the receiver, and then the 4K output can be connected to a projector or monitor. As mentioned before, you can display up to 4 separate sources at one time. So in this type of configuration or installation for the AW200 in a networked or more of a permanent type installation, you would connect the power to the receiver, network cable to your corporate network, and HDMI to your monitor. So in this, there could be a couple different ways for the installation for the AW200 or the AR200. The receiver could sit behind your monitor or could be sitting on a tabletop somewhere. The wireless antennas can be adjusted for a wall mount or a table mount. So when you first boot up the receiver, the HDMI output will look like this, the main screen, where you have the SSID and password. Those are configurable. In the upper right, there is receiver functions and connection status, which show if AirPlay is enabled, how many devices are connected. If you're wireless, you can configure this as a wireless access point if needed, and if your hardwired network connection is up and running. Lower left, you will see an IP address. That IP address listed there is the wireless. If you had a hardwired connection, you would see 2 IP addresses in the lower left. And then in the lower right, it will show you the AW200 firmware version. If the receiver is connected to a network that has internet access, it will go out to the AVer servers and compare the current firmware installed on the receiver and the transmitting pod. And should you have time, you can update the firmware. Quick description of the icon functions and their descriptions. As mentioned, return control to computer this is when an AVer receiver connects to a touch monitor. The device can then return control to computer via the monitor touchscreen. The AirPlay icon, if it's shown on the screen, that is an indication that it is enabled. If it was disabled, the icon would not be there. The receiver connection status icon shows you how many devices are currently paired or connected to the receiver. Your network cable connection icon, wireless connection, and then as well as if newer firmware is available. So next, you would connect the pod to your laptop and then select pair. So next, we will now connect the pod to your laptop. Notice on the bottom of the pod there is a hardwired USB cable, which we will connect for 5 volts. Also confirm that on the pod you are set for the in PC mode. Take the provided HDMI cable, connect it to the HDMI input on the pod. There is also a connection for mini DP, as well as USB and Ethernet, which supports PoE 5 volts at 1 amp. But next, we will connect the USB cable and HDMI. It's currently, the ring around the button is currently blinking red, looking for the paired AR200 or the receiver. Once it's found, it will show a solid red ring as well as a green LED, indicating that it has paired or found the receiver. Next, in order to connect and actually begin to transmit, you will press the button and the ring will turn solid white, indicating it has paired and connected to the receiver. Worth noting at this point is that all the processing and all the resources being used is happening within the pod. None of the resources are being used up in your technology. So all that's taking place to push that information over is happening in the pod. As mentioned before, this right here shows how many users are connected, and currently I have 1 user connected to the receiver. I will press the connect button. It takes roughly 2 seconds. And as you see, this is what's now being transmitted to the receiver. To disconnect, simply press the button, and within 2 seconds, it goes away. Notice on the lower left here, it shows 2 IP addresses. One is your hardwired, the top one, and then the wireless, should you want that. Again, it is configurable. You can enable or disable the wireless as needed. Once the IP is configured, you would type that IP address into a browser, such as Chrome, and you will get this screen. The default password is 6 zeros. It will ask you initially if you want to change that default password. Please make a note of this. But if you forget and cannot remember it, you could always do a factory default with the reset button on the back of the receiver. In this case, I will select skip. And here's what we have under admin settings. So under Wi-Fi channel, we can select which country, which channel, which bandwidth you would like to use. Your LAN IP setting. Next is the LAN IP setting. You can set it for automatic or static. I currently have mine set to static. This is for the hardwired connection. Your SSID, should you want that broadcast or hot, or you could set it to hide the SSID or turn it off altogether for say a week or so, or whatever you need to turn it off, or and then enable it at a later date. password for the SSID. My screen. So you notice the home screen of the AW or the AR200 had sort of a tutorial on how to connect the pod and indication of the where to press the button. So that background, you could change that to match your corporate logos and whatnot. It does need to be 1920 by 1080 PNG format and less than 2 megabytes in size. A quick tip, the borders, if you can, make them darker, because the information displayed here will be in white. So if you have a white background, it might be very difficult to see what the SSID is and password, etc. So keep that in mind. That's my screen. AirPlay setting. Again, you can enable or disable. And that is what this icon shows. So this showing here indicates that AirPlay is enabled. If it were disabled, this would not be shown. Screensaver, should you want the screen to go blank after 15-30 minutes or an hour. The way to wake it up would be to actually log in to the device the way we are now, or actually connect a pod should wake it up. Wi-Fi Enterprise, if you want advanced or more for your more advanced securities. Here for MSCHAP, you would upload the ca.pem file here, or if you were going EAP TLS, you would then also add a certificate and a private key.pem files. Oh, did I skip over? So admin password would be the password to actually log into the AR200. This is where you could do that as well. Fixed host. You could set it to dynamic or a fixed IP. Chromecast setting, you can enable or disable. And then a cast control if you wanted some random key or a fixed key for that cast code. Cancel upgrade. As mentioned before, if the receiver is connected to a network that has access to the internet, it will go out to the AVer servers and compare what you have with what's on the server. So in this case, it shows local version 0.25, and then the AVer server version is 0.25. So this is up to date. This mentions the local version, so it did find the pod, but for some reason the server didn't update. And what I've noticed is if we do a refresh the second time, it then found the server version. Go back to admin setting. This allows you the ability to upgrade, or we just went in there, reboot if needed, and then reset to default. Under device management, you have the ability to change the language. English, French, Dutch, Espanol. Cancel that. Your resolution, if you wanted a fixed resolution, you can adjust it here. Max connections, this is important. So the default is 8 users. So if you should happen to purchase an additional, say, 6 pods or 8 pods, and you're adding them to your AR200, you would need to adjust this to allow for more users. Android audio streaming, pairing file. Should you you order more pods, you want to pair them with your receiver, so you need to make sure they have a pairing file. There's a couple ways to do that. The details are in the how-to manual on our website. But basically there's a couple different situations, but one situation is the AR200 is mounted behind the monitor, and the USB port of the AR200 may be a little difficult to get to. So you can actually download this file to a USB stick and then update the pod that way. Display mode, whether it's fit to screen or zoom, and then time restart. This time restart, if it senses no users connected for an 8-hour period, it will automatically restart. So this concludes the video tutorial on the AVer AW200 4K wireless presentation system. Thank you and good luck.